A community in Mtwalume on the south coast of KZN is calling for greater police visibility after the body of a fifth woman was found in a sugarcane field. Now, there are real fears that a serial killer is on the loose, and the community is demanding the urgent intervention of Police Minister Bheki Cele. Meanwhile, the University of KwaZulu-Natal yesterday hosted a webinar to look at policing through violence in South Africa's lockdown and the rights of citizens versus police responsibilities. It found that the lockdown may have had the unintended consequence of shutting people off from much-needed services by police, especially victims of gender-based violence. Professor Nirmala Gopal is a professor of criminology at UKZN and was part of that webinar. As you can see, she joins us now live from Durban. Prof, thanks very much for your time and welcome to the AM Report. So, you know, many academics who study crime often make reference to vulnerable communities. And with that in mind, I wonder, of course, we're all horrified about what happened, but I wonder if at all you're surprised that a community like Mtwalume has come under siege in this way.
Good morning, and thank you to Newsroom Africa. Good morning to your viewers. Of course, I'm not surprised that a community like Mtwalume would have this kind of deaths happening, because we've seen this in the past as well. If you go back 100 years, you would see sporadically that we've had serial killers, especially in our rural areas or semi-urban areas. Right. A well-known case, which wasn't too long ago, was that of Moses Sotole, who killed almost 20 women before he was actually apprehended. Having said that, however, I think it's a real concern, and understandably so, for the community of Mtwalume to be anxious and fearful at this point in time, because the question they're probably asking themselves is, who is next?
Absolutely, and we'll get into the psyche of that, especially during the lockdown period. But I'm trying to first ascertain what we know about this crime as a start. You make reference to it so easily as a serial crime or a serial killer on the loose. Police are yet to make a determination of that. But from your standpoint, does it have all the markings of a serial killer at the moment?
It sounds like it has. Of course, the police hasn't released too much of information at this point in time. And I think they are justified in why they are not doing that. Usually serial killers want the hype. It gives them an adrenaline rush when they see that police are out looking for them. And if there's any information that links them to the crime, it gives them an excitement. So I think justifiably the police has not given us as much information as the public would like. But I think if you look at the pattern thus far, it sounds as though it's a serial killer. But what will be important, and the police probably are already doing this, is to look at the scene of the crime and make determinations in terms of the modus operandi, the gender, location, etc. So I think those are the kind of variables that will allow them to begin to sketch whether it meets the criteria or characteristics of a serial killer. But at the moment, I think anecdotally, it sounds like it's a serial killer.
Right. And the string of deaths began in April already. Some people might point to that as a real delay from the state. Do you think that's a fair assessment, that this is an indictment on state apparatus?
There would be different schools of thought, and I think whatever school of thought that people belong to would be fair to the citizens. So if some believe that the state is working too slowly, I think that's fair. And if others believe that there are justifiable reasons for why the state is working at the pace that it is, I think that would also be justified.
Interesting.
Because remember, I think as a citizen, some of us want results quicker than others. Some of us may not understand the challenges that accompany these kinds of investigations.
But as a person who works closely in relation to these issues, I mean, what do you make of how long it appears it's taking to try apprehend whoever's behind this? Is this a reasonable time since April, 5 deaths later?
No, I wouldn't think. I think it's not a reasonable time. Right. Because what's happening is that the ripple effect is you have an entire community that's completely anxious and fearful. And I don't think that goes against the grain of democracy in South Africa in terms of a safe and secure society. And the police is not acting, in my opinion, the police is not acting fast enough, nor are they calling community meetings to at least alert the community in terms of how far they are with their investigation. That may, those kinds of meetings do help to allay some of the fears and anxieties that communities have.
You make reference to this chilling effect that this is happening. Without a doubt, already one would argue that women in South Africa are already on edge. Speak to us about how this is further complicated by the lockdown restrictions and the further impediments that this has put on reporting crimes in communities like Mtwalume.
So I think that's an interesting question because it came up at our webinar yesterday, especially the issue of gender-based violence and the fact that if we link gender-based violence to the fact that the 5 women, those that have already been murdered are women. I think it just increases women's anxiety and women further lose confidence in the policing system. So one of the debates that arose in yesterday's webinar is the fact that the perpetrator is amongst, or sometimes even in the same abode as the victim, and how in practice, how easy does it make it for the women to actually notify the police? And I think that's where police actually fall short, because whilst they may have the guidelines and they may have policies and procedures, in practice there's a disjuncture between what can actually happen. For example, if you are being abused or you are being assaulted, and you have the perpetrator who has this power over you, who's already beaten you up, you're terrified of this person. Practically, do we really believe that he will not stop you from even leaving the abode or the area? So I think that's a big debate that's going on with South African police services at the moment. But I've also heard that they are busy with some kind of research to actually look at the effects of the lockdown on gender-based violence and what they can do differently to afford recourse to women who are in this situation.
I'm also interested to find out, Prof., how much South African researchers, police, etc., know about the character of a serial killer. Have we done enough to understand how, anybody who commits that crime thinks, operates, disguises themselves within their community? I mean, has any time been spent mulling over that question?
So I think, we may underestimate the knowledge of SAPS. Of course, they have various units, and then they will have a special unit that deals with this type of crime. But they would also have their psychologists and their profilers. So importantly is for them to bring in their profilers to understand the psychology, the mental psychology of the perpetrator. Usually these crimes are committed by psychopaths who have had some challenges growing up. And oftentimes they linked with mothers. So if they choose women as their victims, then when you rewind, you would find that in their early years, especially in their foundational years, they would have had problems with their mothers. I want to go back to the comment that I made about underestimating SAPS knowledge. I think there are many SAPS personnel out there who understand the psyche of perpetrators, even of serial killers. I think the problem is that loyalty and patronage is higher up on their value system.
Incredibly interesting insights, yeah.
What I mean by that is that there are many who don't want to, it's like tattletaling. And I think that's where we really need to come in as a society and demand accountability from SAP, so that even if they have this kind of knowledge, even if those who are not working in this special investigative unit should actually be brought in to assist with resolving these crimes. Like you say, April until August, that is far too long.
Professor Nirmala Gopal, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks very much for your time and your insights. Certainly appreciate it.